Hey friends, Jill here. Welcome back to Whispering Willow Farm. Thank you all so much for all of the sweet messages on yesterday's video. Just thinking about us and praying for us for our safety. It did kind of get bad yesterday afternoon, and we have had storms on and off today. But overall, no tornado warnings, so that is really good. With the crazy storm though, also has come some crazy weather. I woke up this morning, it was in the 40s. Right now it's 60, but it's kind of overcast, a little chilly, and it's been mainly like lower mid 50s all day. So I don't know if this is just the weather that it's gonna be throughout the next few days, or if we're gonna get hot again. It has been kind of nice to come outside and not be drenched in sweat. But I'm coming out here just checking on everything in the garden, seeing if anything has popped up that I planted. And then I'm actually going to be deadheading or pinching off my zinnias. My friend Sean came over today to build us a rabbit tractor, which I will be doing a video on this later, and we'll give you guys all the details. But we were talking about flowers, and he asked me if I was deadheading my flowers. I remember on my zinnia trellising video and just starting zinnias, many of you said to pinch my zinnias. And I'll be completely honest, it just wasn't something that I was familiar with, and I didn't look into it, which was obviously an error on my part. Well, after talking with him about the benefits of that and why you do that, I decided that I was going to do that and kind of walk you guys through that process. I have expressed to you guys that one of the reasons I was looking forward to growing flowers the most is expanding my knowledge. Aside from interplanting marigolds that I bought at the store with my tomatoes, or sticking a sunflower in the side of a bed, or some zinnias thrown in a bed, I was definitely not experienced in growing flowers, therefore my knowledge was really low on flowers, and so that's something that I'm wanting to expand in. That is something that you guys will probably see more in the future from our channel, and so I'm really just wanting to take all the tips and the tricks that I can and just use this season of figuring it out. And so that looks like reading a lot of books. I'm watching a lot of YouTube videos on it. Obviously my friend Sean is very knowledgeable. He grows a lot of cut flowers to sell for market. And so taking in all that information I can and immediately applying it is something that I'm trying to do. So when he came over today, he saw I had some pretty tall zinnias, and he told me that I needed to deadhead them and I needed to pinch off the tops, and he really explained that to me. And so that's what I'm going to be doing today. He also gave me some tips on my trellising. And so I've got the trellis on the bottom wire here. He did tell me to go ahead and move that up a level, so I will also do that. And then over here for my giant zinnias, I have just two beds, or I have 2 rows per bed. Here, if you guys remember, I kind of spaced them diagonal to each other. So you guys can see I'm skipping every other one. And he also informed me that just for future reference, that was probably a lot. That this would probably produce more zinnias than I even possibly needed. And so I'll know that next year. He did suggest that I just stick with the 2 per bed. And you can see here that he went ahead and raised this one up. So I will just go through, and we went from the bottom one to the top one. He told me I probably could have started at that level. And you know, that's okay. I'm learning through the process, so I'm definitely not getting discouraged. I'm just taking all the information that I can and really just trying to soak that up. So one of the benefits of pinching your zinnias, and there are other flowers that benefit from this, and then there are some flowers that do not like this, and it will just completely like restrict their growth, is it makes bushier plants. Now I'm telling you this because him and I had a long conversation about this, and then I got online and started researching it before I came out here and started really implementing this in the garden bed. So one of the main reasons that you would pinch your zinnias is to create bushier plants, which we'll talk about in a second. But I did know, I think the reason I've always feared pinching my flowers, which is because I didn't know which flowers were okay with it and which flowers weren't. And so after talking to Sean, doing some of my own research this afternoon, I kind of got a better understanding of which ones it was okay to do that and which ones it wasn't. But it made sense to me because my basil, I pruned my basil, and so I'll link that video below, and it's really the same idea and the same concept. And so when I thought about it that way, like, oh, well, this makes perfect sense for my basil. It's creating a bushier plant. It's creating side shoots. Like, okay, that makes sense. This also made sense to me. But something he stated is just, you know, make sure you know which flowers appreciate the pruning and which ones don't. And so zinnias are a safe one that you can do this too. Now, I've already done some, but we'll go through and do some together, and I'll kind of just try to explain it to you the best way I know, which is a very basic beginner knowledge, because this is just recently something that I've started looking into and had someone help teach me. Alright, so you can see here are my zinnias. This one, for instance, would be one of the ones that was, you know, pretty tall. And then you can see here, this little thing's been pinched off. And so these were some of the ones we went through and did earlier. And essentially what you want to do is keep a couple layers of leaves, just like with the basil. You know, I'd said I like to keep 2 sets and then prune anything above. So essentially what I'm doing here is I'm going to keep these 2, and then I'm going to go right above it, and I'm just going to take my finger and pinch it off. And then this will go into the compost. And then what you have here is this will create side shoots, and now this will create side shoots. So you're taking 2 leaves and making 4 leaves, and then you're also just going to have bushier plants, which are going to produce more shoots. So that made a lot of sense to me. It was also just pretty simple. I mean, it's really just that simple. When you think about, at least keep on, you know, 2 sets of leaves, and then these create shoots and these create shoots. You know, that spoke to me. It was easy, it was simple. It's something I can go through and do all these real quick, which is what I'm about to do. I actually have a flower right here that's already starting to produce some side shoots that I want to show you, which is really good. And I will say too, coming out here, I noticed that some of my plants were a lot leggier than others, and I honestly just didn't know how to fix that. I didn't know that pruning, like this one already had a bud. It's so hard. I'm sorry, little guy, look at that. There's already a bud coming out of there. That's wild. But knowing that this is for the betterment of the flower of a whole. And so I didn't know, when I saw some of those, I thought to myself, well, why are some of these leggier than the other ones? Like, what's going on? Were they, you know, I was trying to figure out. And so I would really encourage you, if you're in a season of trying something new, whether that be growing vegetables, whether that be growing flowers, whatever it may be, always be in a season where you're willing to learn, you know, because had I not just asked questions, had I not spoke with my friends, had I not, you know, done an internet search, would I have had zinnias? Yes. But by doing this, one, I'm sharpening my skill and knowing that zinnias actually prefer to be pruned. And then by doing that, I'm actually going to have better plants because of it. So that's definitely worth it to me. So right here you can see this is already starting to put off shoots, which is really encouraging. I thought I saw another one around here doing the same thing. Yeah, so this little guy over here is starting to put off shoots. Move the straw. So that is really exciting, because now it's just going to redirect its energy into producing more shoots off of this side. So you guys probably saw when I had turned the camera around, there's quite a bit of damage on my zinnias. They're pretty pale, and I think that's just a deficiency in the soil, if I'm being completely honest. Now, we did add compost, which compost, the type that we have, is pretty low in nitrogen. And the last time that this bed had nitrogen added to it was when we had tomatoes in here. So that would have been, you know, last spring when we did our amendments. And so seeing that, I may go through and add some amendments to help that, because obviously, you know, yes, the zinnia, like the stem matters as well. And so, you know, these are things that I'm learning I am seeing pest damage. I'm seeing actually a lot of ants on here right now. Is like, as I was just sitting here going through pinching some of these off, I'm just seeing a lot of ants. Obviously my area is gonna be a lot different, you know, than some of your guys' area. I'm in Arkansas, zone 7B, but I would love to know, because this is such a season of stretching and growth and just soaking up all the knowledge. Have you combated with pests on your zinnias? If so, you know, what have you done? I would love your input on this. I would love your knowledge on this. This is one of those things that I love. I love finding a craft that I'm interested in pursuing and just figuring it out. You guys can see here, y'all see all those holes? So I would definitely love to know what I could do to kind of make that better, to kind of fix that problem, right? I don't want that. So I would certainly love your guys' opinion on that. If you've dealt with these holes being munched through your zinnias, what do you do? I'll be honest, you know, in the past when I've grown zinnias or any type of sunflower, I've never really worried about pests. I've never really had to worry about that or deal with that per se, because I was just cutting them for the table. You know, it wasn't that big of a deal. But obviously you guys know my intention here is to try to sell these and try to figure this out. Now, I'm not putting honestly any pressure on myself this year. You know, when my friend came over and he's like, oh, you planted too many, and I was like, okay, well, I'll put that in my notes and I'll know that for next year, you know, depending on bed sizes when we move and stuff like that. But I'm not putting an unrealistic expectation on myself, because honestly it's just not fair, right? I mean, I've never grown this amount of zinnias. I've never grown zinnias where I've had to, you know, trellis them and worry about that. I'm obviously, like, I've just never done this before, and so I'm having grace with myself. I'm knowing that this is a learning curve. I may not sell any of these cut flowers, and I'm not going to be discouraged by that, because like what I always say is I am growing as a person. And so I would really, you know, encourage you guys, if you're trying something new, whether you're growing flowers, whether you're growing vegetables, whatever it is that you're growing, you know, know that you are growing too. It's not just the flower or the vegetables that you're growing. You know, you're trying to expand your knowledge. You're trying to figure out your pests. You're trying to figure out your climate. You're trying to figure out all these different things that may be new. And so I would just love to encourage you guys, have grace with yourself, because I promise you, you're not going to figure it out in one season. You're probably not going to figure it out in 2 seasons. And if I'm being completely honest, I've been trying to figure out this gardening thing for several seasons, and I learned something new every single year that makes me a better gardener the following year. And this is like my 9th year to grow food. And so I hope that encourages you. There's the freedom to not do it right and be able to come back and do it better. So in this bed, I also had the double blend dahlias that I put down here at the bottom. Now you can also do the same thing with the dahlias, and so I am also going to do that. I'm going to turn you guys around and show you. These are also already putting off side shoots, and so that's really cool to be able just to see the growth that's been taking place with the dahlias. So here we have our dahlia. These have grown quite a bit since I put them in the ground. These actually look way better than the zinnias. It looks like that one's already been topped. I think that might have been one of my examples on. You guys can see it's already starting to put out the shoots. You guys can see here, we've got all these little shoots coming out. And so again, the same idea is that when you remove some of it, instead of it growing taller, it just focuses on putting out side shoots, making a bushier plant, which would result in more flowers. So I'm still just going to keep using the same method that I did with the zinnias and keeping several sets of leaves. Just come in here and pinch the top off. These are actually much easier to do that too, I've noticed, than the zinnias were. We'll just go through, snip some of those off. Now these aren't as tall, and so I am not taking as much off. But on this plant, it's a bit taller, so I'll probably go down here and take a little bit more off. Look at that. I've actually been pretty impressed with these seed dahlias, but I have quite a few more of these guys to do. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me in the zinnia and dahlia bed today. It's always fun when I learn something new to pass that on to you guys, because I often wonder, a lot of times when I'm trying to teach people something, specifically vegetables, things that I know a lot of times I don't mention things because I think, oh, well, someone probably already knows that. Things that you would think everyone knows, they probably don't. Maybe just because, you know, not because they're not smart or they don't know about growing food or you know, vegetables, flowers, whatever it may be, but just simply because no one told them. No one was like, hey, if you do this, this will make your life a lot easier. Hey, if you use this, it'll actually help with this, or whatever. And so I have tried to tell myself more often, Jill, share those little simple nuggets. And so first of all, a lot of you guys did tell me to pinch my zinnias. So one, I acknowledge that you guys were trying to tell me the right thing to do. And I do apologize that I just let my busyness get away from me and never even like research that. But I am glad that now I had someone who was like, hey, you really need to do this. This is why people say do this. So I appreciate having, you know, a friend who kind of stepped in and was like, hey, this is necessary. And also, it's just now that I know this little tip, those of you who maybe weren't aware that you were supposed to pinch your zinnias, or that it is actually really good for them to pinch it, now maybe you have this really simple, practical tip that you can move forward. Maybe you're, you know, in the dreaming stage of having a cut flower garden, or maybe you're actually dabbling in some flowers in your backyard, and this could help you step up your production by that much more, just because your one single plant is producing that much more just by, you know, pinching the top off. Who would have thought? It actually makes a lot of sense. But, you know, I really like to pass these nuggets along as I learn them, as someone teaches them to me, because the only way we're going to become better gardeners and better growers and better stewards of the earth is when someone else tells us something, or we maybe realize something for our own based off of our own research, and we apply it, and then we tell other people. And I mention this to you guys all the time, I always want to be in a place where I'm willing to learn whatever the garden has to teach me, whatever advice anyone wants to give me. I'm always in a place where I want to be teachable, because when I stay in that place mentally, I'm always sculpting my craft. I'm always, you know, expanding my knowledge. I'm always setting myself up to do better for the next time. And so by doing this, I'm learning, well, you know what? I may not have a successful zinnia year. I honestly don't know. I hope I do. But if I don't, I'm not going to get discouraged by that, and I'm going to know what I can do differently. And so I hope this video was really helpful, just a practical way that you can kind of pinch your zinnias, deadhead them, and have a higher production. And also encourage you, if you fail at something now, just know that it's making you better at it, you know, the next day, the next year, the next season. And so be inspired by that. Do not get discouraged in it, because you are growing as a gardener, and that is worth it. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me in the zinnia bed today as I got some of this stuff done. You know, it was really quickly. I got through this entire bed of 130 plants pretty quickly, so that is something to note too. It doesn't take long. If I had pruners, it would have been that much easier. However, I left them in the greenhouse, so I just used my fingers and that was fine. But I hope this simple tip was helpful for you guys and that you can apply it in your garden. So thanks for hanging out with me today. I'll talk to you soon.